The New Orleans Saints are coming into week 3 of the NFL season sitting at 0-2, and right now a lot of people consider them the worst team in the league. But how did they get here? And more importantly, what can they do to turn things around for the future? Let's break it down. Back in 2020, the Saints were still contenders. They finished 12-4, won the NFC South, and had real hopes heading into the playoffs. They had beaten Tom Brady and the Buccaneers twice in the regular season, but when it mattered most, they lost at home in the divisional round. Tampa went on to win the Super Bowl, and that game turned out to be the end of an era in New Orleans. Not long after, Drew Brees announced his retirement that left the Saints scrambling at quarterback. In 2021, they started the year with Jameis, but injuries and inconsistency forced them to cycle through 4 different QBs: Jameis, Trevor Siemian, Ian Book, and Taysom Hill. They ended up 9-8, just missing the playoffs. 2022, more of the same. Jameis started again, then Andy Dalton, but the results were another mediocre season at 7-10. Then, in 2023, they finally brought in their QB, Derek Carr, hoping he could finally stabilize things. Year 1 wasn't bad. They finished 9-8, but it still wasn't enough to get back into the playoffs. Going into 2024, there was some hope that Carr could take a step forward in his second season with the Saints offense under Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael. And at first, it looked like he might. The Saints put up 91 points in the first 2 weeks and looked like real contenders. But after that, they only managed 3 more wins the rest of the way. Carr battled injuries, the offense stalled, and in the offseason came a shock. Derek Carr announced his retirement. That decision left the Saints in yet another quarterback crisis. They drafted 25-year-old rookie Tyler Shugg to compete with Spencer Rattler, who had gone 0-7 the year before. And now, 2 weeks into the 2025 season, Rattler is starting. He's shown flashes, 420 yards for 3 touchdowns and just 1 turnover. But the Saints are still winless after close losses to the Cardinals and injury-riddled 49ers. Getting to this point has been a mix of bad luck and bad decisions, and nothing illustrates that more than their cap space problems. For years, the Saints were known for manipulating the salary cap, pushing money into future years, restructuring player deals, and basically playing financial gymnastics. Their favorite move being spreading bonuses over many years in the future, digging a bigger cap hole for themselves. At one point, they were more than $40 million over the cap. In 2024 alone, they had $24 million in dead cap space, and across the past 5 years, they've almost never had more than $4 million in cap room at a time. That kind of financial hole made it impossible to sign free agents outside of Derek Carr and made contract negotiations with their own players more difficult than they should have been. The good news? Carr's surprise retirement actually cleared up a lot of those issues. For the first time in years, the Saints are in relatively healthy cap shape, sitting with about $13 million in cash. The key now is making sure they do not mess it up again. But cap space isn't the only problem. The Saints' draft and trade moves have been just as damaging. Between 2019 and 2020, they only selected 9 players total. That's a problem, because draft picks, especially later ones, are valuable. Rookie contracts are cheaper than veterans, and the more picks you have, the more chances you get to find contributors. The Saints, though, love to trade up in the draft. That means they give away multiple picks for the chance at a better one. Sometimes that works, but often it doesn't. Take 2021. The Saints traded 2 third-rounders to the Broncos just to move up in the 3rd round. In reality, the talent difference at that point is minimal, so that trade was a clear loss. Then, later in the draft, they traded up again in the 6th round, giving the Indianapolis Colts the 7th rounder. In 2022, things got even worse. They made a massive deal with the Eagles, giving up 2 firsts, a second, a third, and a seventh. In return, they got a slightly better first-round pick, a third, and a fourth. They used that capital to draft Trevor Penning and trade more picks to the Commanders for the Chris Olave pick. Now, Olave is a star, but he's also been banged up. 3 concussions already, partly from the hospital balls thrown to him from the rough quarterback play, and those trades also handed the Eagles the ammo they used to cement their championship roster, including Jalen Carter and the draft picks that became trade pieces for A.J. Brown. In 2023, they made one of their rare good trades, sending Sean Payton's rights and a third-rounder to Denver in exchange for a late first and a second. That was solid value, but on draft day, they reverted to old habits, trading up twice in the 4th round, giving away picks in the process. The pattern is clear. The Saints chase fewer, higher value picks instead of stockpiling more shots at talent. But no pick is guaranteed. First rounders bust, and third day guys can become starters. Let's look at this graph courtesy of PFF. Here's a graph of hit rate versus draft selection over 15 years. Hit rate is basically if they become a starter or near a starter. It's based on snap counts. So obviously you want guys on your team that become starters. So as you can see, it's pretty normal. First and second rounders are going to be above 40% hit rate. And then as we get into the third round, we're looking at 30% and below. The big thing to look at here is the difference between, let's say, a 4th and a 7th rounder. It's very minimal. However, the Saints like to move up in like the 4th, 5th, or 6th round, exchanging later draft picks. This is not very smart, as these draft picks could be considered to be completely equal, and the Saints are giving teams 2-1 on these picks, losing draft capital. The Packers and Eagles understand this. They load up on picks, stack rookie contracts, and keep their cap flexible. That's why their worst seasons recently still look like the Saints' best ones. Right now, these teams are the best in the NFC, and the Saints, the worst. In fact, the Saints have helped both of these teams get their stars. The pick the Packers used to draft Edge Cooper came in a trade move up for the Saints, where they picked Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I actually really like going into his second year. However, when you do these trades as a franchise, it puts more pressure on these picks to succeed. If Kool-Aid McKinstry didn't pan out, you're losing 3 shots, including one who ended up being Edgerrin Cooper. In the NFL draft, there is no difference between going 2 for 10 or 2 for 6 on picks. But it's more sustainable to hit a 20% rate than at a 33% rate. So, where does that leave the Saints now? There are actually some positives. The cap situation is manageable. They've also started drafting more. 23 players over the past 3 drafts. This shows a willingness to change their philosophy. Coaching also looks a little brighter. After Dennis Allen and Darren Rizzi, the Saints moved on to Kellen Moore as head coach, Brandon Staley as defensive coordinator, and Doug Nussmeier as offensive coordinator. Say what you want about Staley, but he's had success running defenses, and Moore has proven he can design an offense. Together, I think this staff has potential. And also, these coaches have a lot of experience with each other, and I think that's valuable. On the field so far, the team has played tough. Both losses this year came down to final drives where they just couldn't finish. That shows fight, and it shows they're not completely out of games. Here's the blueprint I would have if I were Mickey Loomis. Start moving on from veterans like Cam Jordan and Alvin Kamara. They've been great players and great franchise guys, but their contracts and ages don't fit where this team is. Trade them for picks or dump them. Even if it adds some dead cap, the Saints need cheap contracts. Keep stacking draft capital instead of burning it on these risky trades. And finally, as what will likely be a top 3 pick, get a true franchise quarterback, whether that's Carson Beck, Drew Aller, or somebody else. This team needs stability at the most important position. So yes, things look rough right now. The Saints are 0-2. Their roster has a lot of holes, and the last 5 years have been a mix of mismanagement and bad luck. But there's also real hope. The cap is finally not a ridiculous issue. They're drafting more, and with a young quarterback and some smart decisions, they could turn this around sooner than people may think. Saints fans, what do you think? Are you optimistic about the future, or do you think this team is stuck in mediocrity? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more NFL content every week.